I'm ready to do some killer upgrades for my 224 Valkyrie you've seen here on the channel, and what better stock to pick than the new Agility from Boyd's. Gavin Gu here from UltimateReloader.com. I just onboarded Boyd's Hardwood gun stocks as an official Ultimate Reloader partner, and to kick that relationship off, I thought, what better stock to start with than the Agility? The Agility was launched publicly early this year around the time of the SHOT Show, and is really an evolution of a more traditional hardwood gun stock design, updated with some really clean lines. That was the first thing that I noticed when I looked at the Agility, is kind of that harder edge look to it. Really like that, and it's got kind of that traditional Boyd's construction. Laminated hardwood. It gives you that interesting figuring when they profile the stock. I thought it would be fun to do something. This is called Blaze, the sort of silver alternated with orange color. I thought that would kind of really pop visually. In terms of features, it's got the adjustable length of pull. This is more of a compact stock, so I have that extended out. You just hit the button and you can adjust that on the fly. I chose the optional cheek riser. There's a couple set screws here, and you can adjust the height of the comb. It's got a hybrid grip, which is optimized for both offhand shooting and prone shooting. And then it's got a semi-beaver tail forend that has kind of a rounded contour, but places for your fingers to hold on to. The swivel stud accommodates a Harris type bipod or other bipod if that's something that you want to mount up there. And of course, a sling as well. So the rifle that I chose for this project is this Remington 700 base 224 Valkyrie that you've seen here on the channel in a bunch of different videos. This thing is a tag driver. It's an amazing shooter. It's got a standard factory Remington 700 short action, and the bolt face was opened up by the folks over at Benchmark Barrels for the 224 Valkyrie bolt face. It's got an oversized recoil lug. It's got a Benchmark 1-in-7 twist button rifled barrel. It's got the KRG Bravo stock, and it's got basically a standard AICS magazine, but with the Primal Rights conversion kit for 224 Valkyrie. The shim and the follower drop right in, and you make a couple adjustments to the feed lips, and then you're kind of all set. And that's worked really, really well. This is basically the barreled action that I'm going to use for this Agility stock project. And I know there's a couple tweaks I might need to make. I know for sure I need to increase the width of the inlet for the recoil lug, because this is for a standard Remington 700. This thing is like 0.3 inches thick. It's way, way thicker than a standard Remington 700. If you do have a standard Remington 700 or the other inlets, of which there's almost an infinite variety of offered by Boyd's, your whole barreled action will just drop right in. I also have a really oversized bull barrel here. I might need to do a little bit of clearancing in there, but that's all cool because this is a hardwood gun stock, and that means I'm going to bed it. I'm thinking to do epoxy bedding for that part of the project. And then to kind of finish things off, I thought it'd be really cool to do a Cerakote job on the barrel. That's right. I have a full video planned here very shortly to give you a guided tour of my all-new Cerakote facility. Everything from the air compressor and air dryer to the sandblaster and prep area to a really awesome booth with some DIY air exhaust evacuation stuff that I built in there, and a bunch of other really cool stuff. We'll start real simple. I'm thinking to do graphite black on the barrel and the thread protector and the recoil lug. The action is already black, so I think I'm going to leave that as is. And this should come together as a really, really cool rifle in the end. I can't wait to see the final product. So I'm going to get started on the gunsmithing. I'll guide you through each of those processes, and then we'll take this rifle out and shoot it. So here it is, the finished product. This is such a cool rifle. I absolutely love how it turned out. It has exceeded my expectations. And as you see here, we have the Silencer Central Banish 30. I would use my Banish 223, but I've got 5/8 24 threads on this particular barrel, and my Banish 223 has half 28. And so I've got the 7-inch config here. I can also do a 9-inch on that one. I just think this is really clean. I really like the blaze, the orange and silver. I love the lines on the Agility. Just super happy with how this turned out. Now, before I get into all of the steps to get this done, I did kind of a custom job on this one. I'm going to do a quick review of the 224 Valkyrie bolt action build that I did a number of years ago. I also did an AR-15. You're going to want to watch that series if you're more interested in how this rifle came together. So it's a Remington 700 factory short action receiver, Badger Ordnance .312 inch thick recoil lug, really big recoil lug, and I'll get into why that's important in a moment. Benchmark button rifled, barrel blank, 1-in-7 twist, 24 inches overall length. Has been a great shooter, really fun rifle, really like the thing. And in preparation for bedding, I'll just note that you can order a Boyd stock for your rifle. You can remove the bottom metal, remove the barreled action, sandwich it back together in the Boyd stock, and you're off and running. A lot of guys will want to do a bedding job to improve the stability and accuracy of the rifle, and I decided to do that. Well, I also had some other work to do as well. So preparing for bedding, I have this oversized recoil lug, a lot wider than a Remington 700 factory recoil lug, and a lot taller too. So I enlarged that recoil lug pocket. I made it a lot deeper and I pushed it forward so that I have some room. I also backed it up just a little bit so I had room for a layer of epoxy behind it. That way we have perfect support. And second, I needed to enlarge the barrel channel because this is a much heavier barrel than what would be standard on a Remington 700 factory hunting rifle, for instance. Then I went on to making the pillars, and I thought to myself, what diameter do I want to see? Well, some guys are using 1/2 inch, some guys are using much smaller ones that are very thin wall. One of the concerns is leaving enough wood around each of the pillars. So I thought, 7/16 inch looks really good. So I headed over to the Precision Matthews TL1660 and made a couple of pillars out of 1/2 inch aluminum stock, turned down to 7/16, drilled them, parted them to length, took them over to the PM 949 Precision Matthews milling machine and used a boring head to contour them to the same diameter as the rifle receiver so that when the pillars come up out of the stock, they're a perfect cradle for that round contour bottom of the Remington 700 action. That turned out really well. You can use straight pillars on the end without the contour. The epoxy is going to flow around them. It's going to work just about as good, but I felt like it was more elegant to contour them. I used 5-minute epoxy to install the pillars. This is just to hold them in place until the bedding is done. And when that had cured, I flipped the stock upside down and trimmed with an end mill the pillars down to where they were protruding about 5 to 10 thousandths of an inch because I want that bottom metal to clamp onto the pillars, and I want the receiver to sandwich onto the pillars on the other side and the action screws to clamp everything perfectly together. And that's why the pillars are important. Very consistent clamping pressure. It's going to lead to better stability and less walking around as the rifle is shooting and heating up and cooling down and all that stuff. So that was kind of a fun project to make the pillars. Everything was trimmed. At this point, I did a test fit. I put the barreled action into the stock, put the Hawkins M5 DBM on, and made some action screws to the appropriate length. I used a special split sleeve bushing that I made just for this project. I'm going to use this moving forward. So you can put the action screw in from behind, clamp it in your lathe, and part it off to length. It kind of makes it a real easy way to hold the work for that. And from that test fitting, I realized I had a little bit more inletting to do for the barrel channel to get it to the dimensions that I wanted. I checked my feeding. Now this is really important because, again, we have these pillars sticking up about 20 thousandths higher than the inlet on the stock, and that's to allow for a layer of epoxy to flow underneath. Some guys are going to tell you that you need to do a bunch of wood removal to make tolerant allowance for the epoxy and all that, and my solution is a little simpler as long as your feeding is going to work. And checking a dry fit of everything before the bedding is going to help ensure that you don't have any surprises afterwards. And then I like to use Hornady One Shot, which is a case lube for reloading, as a release agent on the action. I mask the recoil lug. I got kind of I put packing tape on the top of the bottom metal. I got that pushed up and checked everything. One shot, the epoxy won't stick to it. It's really easy to apply. A couple quick coats and you're done. So with that, we go into the bedding process itself. Now this is something I always make sure I have my A game on, because bedding is one of those things you want to do it once if you can. And just be prepared. If it's your first bedding job, it's probably going to take 1, 2, maybe more times and that kind of thing to get a firm grasp on what's going to really work for you. I use DevCon. This is something that the guys at Bat Machine pointed me towards. F2, which is powdered aluminum. It's I think a 9-to-1 by weight mix between the epoxy itself with the powdered aluminum and the catalyst. And from Cambridge Environmental, I've got the A&D FX120i scale I used to mix that. Then I used a trick I learned from Daryl over at Bat Machine. Thank you, Daryl. Nothing's worse than popping out your rifle action from a bedding out job and you've got bubbles in there. Like, what the heck? These pinholes, large little sections of bubble. It's just super, super irritating, and there's a very simple fix. And that is, after you've mixed your epoxy, either in the bowl before applying or after pouring it into the rifle action, hit the top surface gently with the heat gun, and then take like a toothpick or a popsicle stick and tap the top surface. Bubbles come up the top and they pop, and then they're not going to be a problem. And sure enough, this job turned out really well, and that worked awesome. Okay, so now that the epoxy is bubble free, I took my popsicle stick and applied it to all of the appropriate surfaces. And then there's that moment when you got to set the action into stock. Now I try and come maybe a little bit forward, come down and then back, so that you get that nice squeeze of the epoxy behind the recoil lug in the pocket there to the perfect placement, and not to suction air bubbles into it or whatever, not to squeegee it all out of place, that kind of thing. I put the action screws up from the bottom and tighten them until they hit, and then back them off a little bit. You don't want any stress on the action, but because I did those contoured pillars, I felt like I just wanted them to be touching and to make sure I didn't impart any stress on the action. Okay, then it's time to clean the excess. Hopefully you're going to see a bead of epoxy all the way around that has squeezed out. That means you got enough in there. Good job. If you don't see that all the way around, you might have to do the job again, or pop the action out while it's still fluid, add more, and then push it back down. I had to do that exactly one time. It was not pleasant, but the bedding job turned out good, so that was good news. Okay, at that point, one little tip that I learned from Gordy Gritters is to use a little bit of vinegar on Q-tips, and that cleans the epoxy right up from the perimeter. And then if you have any engraving on the side of the action, you're going to want to get it out at this point and not later. Trust me. Not fun to try and get that out later. Okay, in the morning, 8 hours later, whatever, you're going to pop it apart. And this is the test of the adhesion between the epoxy and the stock. And sure enough, I had perfect adhesion. It took quite a bit of force I actually had to have the bolt in and pull up on the back of the bolt to pop it from that direction, and poop, popped out. Everything was good. I've got a little bit of excess. So we go over to the milling machine, again, the PM949 TV that I've got from Precision Matthews, and with the same long 1/4 inch end mill, I went around the internal perimeter of the bedding job and cleaned up pretty much the whole border, because it's going to squeeze kind of into all of the interior surfaces, and you want to clean that up. Especially where you're going to have any interference issues, that kind of thing. I also like to go down into the recoil lug pocket and clean the front portion of that. So I have a little step at the bottom, and then going up, I've taped the recoil lug, so I have a little bit of tolerance there for when you put the barreled action in and take it out. You don't have to. You definitely want to tape the front of it so that it's not locked in from all directions. Yeah, that's totally up to you. So things came out really well, and with everything validated, I tested my feet again, made sure I was really happy with everything. Now it's time to go on to the Cerakote process. And this was a bit of experimentation on my part. This was my first Cerakote job in this new booth. Like I said, I'm going to be publishing multiple stories covering all of the specifics of my fume evacuation system and sandblasting and kind of the whole thing, a mix of off-the-shelf stuff and DIY. So I made this PVC end of a rifle action, if you will, section of pipe with 1/16 by 16 TPI threads on the inside. I screwed that on the end. It clamped my recoil lug in place, so I was kind of masked on both sides. Only have Cerakote on the outside kind of thing. Really happy with that. Had a little issue in the oven. I'll talk about that in a moment. I didn't think about baking it with this on because it has to stay as a unit. Okay, so I put on my PVC end cap for the receiver threads. I put some welding wire that's copper coated all the way through. I made a little plug for the muzzle end to protect the crown and to prevent sandblasting or Cerakote, any of that stuff from going inside the bore. And that slipped over the wire. And so I put it into my sandblaster. I did my blasting, you know, getting my whole chops down here. I'd done it at Cerakote. It's been a little while. Came out really nice, hung it in the Cerakote booth, and now it's time to mix the Cerakote. They have a free app someone wrote for Cerakote. I put in my graphite black, and it told me exactly what the weight ratios need to be at 18:1, which is kind of the middle sweet spot for the H series that I'm using. There's different series of Cerakote. H series is probably the most versatile and the most popular. And I thought that would be great for this, you know, particular job. So I mixed my Cerakote. I strained it into the Iwata gun. I had that over on the side. Double check everything. Boom! It's time to start laying down the Cerakote. And what you do is you use a pattern so that you can hit both sides of things like Picatinny rails. And once you get into that motion, you know, regardless of what you're spraying, it's going to go on pretty evenly from kind of all directions. And reviewing the video footage, I have a little bit more work to do to maintain a constant distance, you know, from the part, but I used all the tricks that I learned down there at Cerakote to get the gun set and all that. Did 3 coats with about 5 minutes splash time between each coat. Then you wait 15 minutes for an air flash before it goes into the oven. And I have the Light Armor LA 2500 UR100 code. Will save you $100 on that. That is an exclusive. So if you are in the market for Cerakote equipment, you're going to want to check that out for sure. Yeah, so I put it into the oven, and then I thought to myself, oh, I just put PVC into an oven set to 300 degrees. So first thing I did was I lowered it to 250, and I waited the 2 hours, and I hoped that this thing didn't fall apart. And as you can see here, if you look closely on the end of this, it almost did. My welding wire has a little loop there, and it just started to deform. Barely made it through that. So the moral of the story is, don't use PVC for something like this. I'm going to use aluminum or steel, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing, make the same assembly, and I think that will work well. The muzzle crown protector and bore protector worked really well. That's a trick I think I'll be using again, maybe with rubber. A lot of different ways to do this kind of stuff. So the barreled action turned out really great. I took it back to my laser engraving station and re-engraved the barrel because my previous engraving on the other side had kind of gotten filled in. Not a real big deal. At this point, I was ready to put together the completed rifle, and that's what we've got here. It looks really awesome. And so to review, we've got the Boyd's Agility. This is for the Remington 700 with custom bedding, Hawkins Precision, M5 DBM for the bottom metal, the Remington 700 custom build, but factory receiver, barreled action. I've got custom AICS magazines that have a Primal Rights kit that has kind of the backer follower here. The main follower here is optimized for different cartridges, including the 224 Valkyrie. I did have to bend the feed lips just a little bit, and I do have a complete video and article on that if you're interested. So we've got the Harris SBRM. It works with the swivel stud that comes with the Agility. Well, of course, we're ready for a sling too if you have a swivel stud sling. And then we've got the Silencer Central Banish 30 suppressor. So a great package. One other note is if you're interested in doing this kind of work, you're definitely going to want to check out the Sonoran Desert Institute. They've got a degree program, they've got a certificate program, and you can study at home. They've got a great staff, people that I'm getting to know myself and to work with. If you want to know more about that, go to sdi.edu/GavinToobe, GAVINTOOBE. So, shooting this rifle, really great. I shot it off the bench and I found that I was using a larger bag in the back, kind of up back here, partially in the kind of hook area on the bottom of the buttstock. And then I just used the Harris SBRM. I shot it with the Banish 30. I shot it with the bare muzzle and groups down sub half MOA. I'm totally happy with that. Then I took it down to the industrial yard where we've got all of our Caldwell steel set up to do some offhand shooting, because I figured this type of rifle would make a great hunting rifle. And so I thought, let's see how it feels when I'm shooting offhand. And that is always a lot of fun, but I found this was a very good pointing and aiming rifle. It felt good in terms of the ergonomics. Of course, you've got the button here, the length of pull adjustment. You've got the cheek riser that you can set, and so on and so forth. So that is kind of the summary of the build. A quick review on all the tools. So I've got all these great tools set up. For the swap out of the barrel, I'm using this Short Action Customs modular barrel vise. This thing is cool because you've got a bolt on one side, it flops open. I was using my 1 1/4" bushings. One goes on one side, one goes on the other side. You just set your barrel shank right there, you close it, and then torque it down to about 24 foot-pounds of torque. You're good to go. It's got an Arca rail on the bottom. I've got my Arca mount over on the side of the bench there. This is actually new. They just sent me their updated stand for the bushings. They've done this black anodized treatment, and it's laser engraved, which is much higher contrast than the bare aluminum ones that they have. So I'm kind of excited about that upgrade. Pretty cool. Also, what I love about this is they recommend the usage of drywall tape instead of the powdered resin that I normally use between the bushings and the barrel shank. So that works out really well as well. And a few things from Wheeler. We've got the fat wrench, so I use that to reinstall the scope rail to 25 inch-pounds, and then to do the scope ring bases at 65 inch-pounds. It's got pretty much infinite adjustability. I also use their fat sticks. The Wheeler scope level kit is kind of cool. I use this little level here on the milling machine. I use that to set my angles to make sure I was all plumb and proper before I did my inletting adjustments and that kind of thing. And then I really like this bit set as well because it's got a full Torx. It's got all the Allen, SAE, and metric and stuff like that. So these are basically tools that I use all the time. They're in the shop right on my rolling cart back here, and really, really good stuff. So here's what I'd like to know. I'm done with this project. I'm really pumped. Also, a quick mini announcement. I've got another agility coming for another rifle build. This one's going to be a long action, and it's going to be in a different color scheme. So you're going to want to check that out for sure. Okay, but back to my question is, are you running a Boyd stock? If so, which one? And what rifle barreled action are you running in it? What cartridge are you shooting out of it, and what are you shooting with it? Let's talk about your Boyd stock. Absolutely, this is really good stuff. So that concludes this video, and that means it's time to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, where we've got unrestricted content, and Instagram. Make sure to follow us on all those channels. Ultimate Reloader also has a commercial solutions division serving law enforcement, the military, and the gun industry. We have some unique capabilities, including a comprehensive suite of recoil testing and evaluation capabilities, trigger profiling, and more. If you're interested in custom rifles like what we build here on the channel or gunsmithing services, you're going to want to go to rifles.ultimatereloader.com and get on the wait list. If you're interested in becoming a professional gunsmith, check out the Sonoran Desert Institute. They've got a degree program, they've got a certificate program, and you can study from home. Learn more at sdi.edu. Thanks again for watching.